Good morning, you're watching Anewz. I'm Dilek Tuna. Here are the top stories for the hour. US President Donald Trump ambushes South African president in the Oval Office with claims of white persecution. 2 Israeli embassy staff have been killed outside a Jewish museum in downtown Washington D.C. Turkey, Iraq and Syria to form a joint mechanism for PKK-YPG disarmament. Tensions flared during South African President Cyril Ramaphosa's visit to the White House. US President Donald Trump confronted him with footage of anti-white incitement in South Africa. He also announced a halt to US aid. Ramaphosa acknowledged the challenges and pledged deeper cooperation. For more, let's hear from our Ubay Shapandar in Washington, D.C.
South African President Cyril Ramaphosa came to the White House on Wednesday to talk about improving ties and the bilateral relationship with the United States, which has been at times extremely tense. President Trump surprised the South African leader and in front of a packed room with the world's media in the Oval Office played a series of clips that showed the mass incitement against white African citizens of South Africa that have been organized by extremists seeking their extermination. President Trump has cut all foreign assistance to South Africa, and he's offered refuge to white Africans in the U.S. in order to escape persecution. President Trump displayed footage of rallies in South Africa in which thousands were chanting, quote, "Kill the Boer," a reference to white Afrikaans, as well as an interview with a prominent South African political official widely viewed as inciting attacks against the Afrikaan population in South Africa. On a different topic, on the African continent, President Ramaphosa thanked President Trump for the ongoing efforts by Washington to broker a peace deal in the conflict between the Democratic Republic of Congo and neighboring Rwanda, a conflict that has killed and displaced thousands in a mineral-rich area. White farmers in South Africa have faced repeated attacks over the years, and many fear that their land will be forcibly appropriated. White House officials have said that they want to see the South African government do more to stop such attacks and to crack down on the incitement against white Afrikaans. After viewing the video that was showed to him by President Trump, President Ramaphosa said that the incitement in South Africa was being led by a small minority. President Trump pressed back, saying that more needs to be done to prevent mass killings. When pressed, Ramaphosa relented and said that South Africa faces significant criminality and that they need to work closer with the U.S. as a partner to confront such challenges. Trump reiterated that thousands of ethnic white Afrikaans are trying to immigrate to the U.S. because they feel that they will be killed in South Africa and have their land taken, and that nothing is being done by the South African government to stop such attacks and activity. Clearly, this is an issue that the U.S. president is passionate about, as well as one of his key advisors, Elon Musk, who comes from South Africa. And this is an issue in which the U.S. government is putting significant pressure on South Africa. Further talks behind closed doors are expected to take place between the two leaders, hoping to resolve this issue. Ubay Shapandar, Washington, D.C., Anewz.
Canada is looking at potential investments in US President Donald Trump's proposed $175 billion Golden Dome missile defence shield. Prime Minister Mark Carney confirmed Canada's interest, but did not specify potential financial contributions. Carney mentioned that he had discussed the concept of the Golden Dome a couple of times with the President. The project aims to counter potential missile threats from nations such as China and Russia. Two Israeli embassy staff have been killed outside a Jewish museum in downtown Washington, D.C., according to U.S. Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem. She announced the deaths on social media. Local police say the victims, a man and woman, were shot while exiting an event at the Capitol Jewish Museum. The shooting happened at just after 9 p.m. local time Wednesday night in an area with numerous tourist sites, museums and government buildings, including an FBI's Washington field office. Reports indicate that multiple employees of the Israeli embassy were at a museum event at the time of the shooting. A suspect is now in custody. Israel's ambassador to the United Nations called the incident a depraved act of anti-Semitic terrorism. In Germany, 5 teenagers, including a 14-year-old, have been arrested, accused of plotting far-right terror attacks. Authorities say the group was radicalised online and were planning to burn down migrant shelters and silence political opponents.
German police have dismantled what they describe as a teenage terror cell, a far-right group called the Last Wave of Defence, allegedly plotting attacks on asylum seekers and political opponents with the aim of undermining Germany's democratic system, according to federal prosecutors. Authorities say 5 teenagers, aged 14 to 18, were arrested in the operation. In total, 8 suspects linked to the group are under investigation, including 3 others between 18 and 21 who were already in custody. All suspects hold German citizenship. Early morning raids hit 13 locations across 5 regions, with over 220 officers involved. German Interior Minister Alexander Dobrindt confirmed that the phenomenon has been around for quite some time.
Diese Gruppe konnte heute mit einem hohen Einsatz an Polizeikräften.
This group was dismantled today with the heavy use of police forces. Some young people have been detained. This is a phenomenon that has been around for quite some time and causes us great concern. There is a phenomenon now in one area of youth, a small area, but a very aggressive, which are clearly influenced by far-right ideology. They become radicalised and are then ready to carry out joint terrorist attacks. The fact that this police operation took place today prevented further arson attacks from being carried out.
Prosecutors say 2 suspects set fire to a cultural centre in Altdüben last October, causing major damage but no injuries. In January, others broke windows at a migrant shelter in Schmölln and tried to start a fire with fireworks, leaving extremist slogans like "Foreigners out" and "Germany for the Germans." Another planned arson attack on a refugee home in Senftenberg was stopped after arrests. The suspects were identified by their first names and initials in a statement released by federal prosecutors, who confirmed that all are German nationals. The investigation follows an earlier wave of arrests and adds to growing concerns about far-right extremism among youth. Germany's Justice Minister called the case shocking, warning that far-right terrorism is now reaching minors. Authorities say the group is linked to a wider network of far-right extremists who use social media to radicalise young people and spread violent ideas. The threat appears to be growing. A recent report shows politically motivated crimes in Germany rose by 40% last year, with far-right violence increasing the most.
Technical level peace talks involving Russia and Ukraine could happen as early as next week at the Vatican, according to Finnish President Alexander Stubb. In an interview with his country's national broadcaster, Stubb said the discussions would likely include representatives from the US and European countries, calling it a positive step toward broader international involvement. He highlighted Europe's growing role in the peace process, saying, "This is what we've hoped for from the beginning." Earlier this week, US President Donald Trump spoke with European leaders, including Stubb, sharing details of his recent conversation with Russian President Vladimir Putin. Tensions persist on the diplomatic front of the Russia-Ukraine war as global leaders intensify efforts to push for a ceasefire. With the Vatican emerging as a potential venue for peace talks, all eyes are now on Moscow's next move and whether renewed international pressure can bring the conflict closer to resolution.
As the Vatican emerges as a possible venue for the next round of peace talks, Russia has yet to respond to the proposal, but denies accusations from Ukraine and European leaders that it's intentionally delaying the process. Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni confirmed Pope Leo's readiness to host talks and thanked him for his commitment to peace. The push for a ceasefire gained momentum after US President Donald Trump spoke separately with Vladimir Putin and Volodymyr Zelensky, calling the Vatican a powerful symbol for negotiations. Kyiv remains open to dialogue, with Zelensky reiterating his willingness to meet Putin directly and explore different formats. He also said a high-level meeting involving the US, Ukraine, Russia, European countries and Great Britain is being considered potentially in Turkey, the Vatican or Switzerland. Despite these efforts, Zelensky's advisor, Mikhailo Podolyak, said recent diplomacy, including Trump's calls, has not led to major progress. Ukraine continues to demand a full, immediate and unconditional ceasefire. Moscow says it is ready to discuss a memorandum on a future peace accord, including ceasefire terms and timing, but insists the next move must come from Kyiv. Foreign Ministry spokesperson Maria Zakharova accused Ukraine's European allies of blocking direct talks, but said those attempts have failed. Meanwhile, Ukraine's allies impose new EU sanctions on Russia. Germany's foreign minister stressed that Europe expects an immediate ceasefire while welcoming Ukraine's willingness to negotiate. US Secretary of State Marco Rubio said Russia may present its ceasefire proposal soon, allowing Washington and partners to assess Moscow's seriousness. However, the US has warned it may withdraw from talks if no progress is made soon. Analysts caution that with Washington potentially reducing its role and Russia showing little urgency, the path to peace remains uncertain and depends heavily on what happens next.
Europe has seen an increase in Chinese investment, with gains reaching 10 billion euros last year. This comes as China seeks to improve its economic relations with the EU. Our Mahnur Maktoum has more from Beijing.
Chinese investment in the EU grew by 47% last year, reaching 10 billion euros, the first increase since 2016. This marks a new chapter in the EU-China economic partnership. Instead of buying existing companies, Chinese firms are now building new factories, especially in sectors such as electric vehicles and batteries. Hungary led the way, attracting major projects such as the CATL's battery plant, BYD's electric vehicle factory, and accounting for 31% of the total investment. The move is strategic. China is trying to get closer to its European customers, meeting EU regulations and becoming a key player in Europe's green economy. This is part of China's broader post-pandemic economic strategy, which encourages Chinese companies to seek diversification and growth opportunities abroad. The ongoing US-China trade war has also pushed Chinese companies to reduce reliance on the American market and shift focus towards Europe as a more stable and reliable destination for long-term investment. In an effort to further facilitate a smoother bilateral cooperation, China has been easing travel restrictions with the EU. As of late 2024, citizens of countries including Germany, France, and Italy can now travel to China for 30 days without a visa. This further encourages and promotes tourism and business trips between the EU and China. These moves together reflect China's new approach in fostering pragmatic and long-term partnerships, building, not buying, and encouraging more exchange with Europe. Mahnur Maktoum, Anewz, Beijing, China.
Israel has allowed 100 aid trucks to enter Gaza. However, according to the United Nations, due to security concerns, the aid remains stuck at a logistics hub and has not yet been delivered to people in need.
The Israeli military said on Wednesday that it had allowed 100 aid trucks carrying flour, baby food and medical supplies to enter Gaza. However, United Nations officials said the aid has not been delivered to those in need as it remains stuck at the logistics hub. They say that security concerns have so far prevented aid from being distributed from the logistics hub. Meanwhile, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu announced that Israel was open to a temporary ceasefire to allow for the release of hostages. However, until then, he said he would press ahead with the military operation to gain full control of the Strip. Following an 11-week blockade on supplies entering Gaza, a total of 98 aid trucks were allowed in on Monday and Tuesday. However, humanitarian organisations and local bakeries report that the aid has yet to reach essential locations such as hospitals, markets and soup kitchens. In the meantime, the humanitarian situation in the Strip continues to deteriorate. While international and domestic pressure on the Israeli government is mounting, opposition figures have warned that current policies risk severely damaging the country's global standing.
The World Health Organization has raised concerns about the ongoing deportation of Afghan refugees from Pakistan, warning that the large influx is putting severe pressure on Afghanistan's already fragile healthcare system.
The World Health Organization has sounded the alarm over the continued deportation of Afghan refugees from Pakistan, saying the influx is placing immense strain on Afghanistan's fragile healthcare system. In a statement, WHO said it is working alongside partners to deliver emergency health services at the Torkham border crossing, one of the main entry points for returning refugees. These returnees, many of whom arrive in poor health, are being treated for a range of conditions, including respiratory infections, malnutrition, and waterborne diseases. WHO warns that the return of thousands of refugees from neighboring countries, particularly Pakistan, could push Afghanistan's already stretched healthcare infrastructure to the brink. The country is facing a storm of humanitarian crises, from severe drought to chronic food insecurity to widespread displacement and repeated outbreaks of infectious diseases. According to WHO estimates, more than 100,000 Afghans were forced to return from Pakistan in April alone, and that number continues to rise. Health officials say the international community must step up support to prevent an even greater crisis from unfolding in Afghanistan. This is Tamim Bahis in Kabul for Anewz.
Turkey is spearheading a comprehensive disarmament initiative targeting the PKK terrorist group in close cooperation with both the central government of Iraq and the Kurdish regional government. Under the coordination of Turkey's National Intelligence Organization, or MIT, the process is gaining momentum across Iraq and Syria.
Turkey's National Intelligence Organization is leading a new plan to establish a joint mechanism aimed at overseeing the disarmament of the PKK terrorist group. The project involves setting up a joint system with the Iraqi central government and the Kurdistan regional government. Officials say talks with all sides have made good progress. The Turkish armed forces are directly engaged in supporting the operation, which spans multiple regions, including Baghdad, Erbil, and Süleymaniye. Authorities say the goal is to find and shut down PKK hideouts, clear camps, locate hidden weapons, and make sure the group stops all armed activities. At the same time, Turkey is working with the Syrian government on a similar plan which targets the YPG terrorist group. Turkey says it's closely watching to see how Syria is pressuring the YPG to give up weapons and start political talks. The entire disarmament operation is expected to conclude by early September. Once the MIT confirms the full surrender of weapons through a final report, the Turkish parliament is scheduled to respond with a major legislative initiative. On the 1st of October, when the new legislative session begins, Parliament is expected to create a National Unity Commission. This group will focus on national reconciliation. It will also help former PKK members who did not commit crimes return to society. Further democratic reforms and reconciliation steps will only begin after MIT confirms that disarmament is complete.
Azerbaijan's road to rebuilding its liberated territories is facing a silent and deadly enemy, landmines. In Karabakh and eastern Zangezur regions, massive demining efforts are underway, but the danger remains. This report takes us to Agdam district, one of the most heavily mined regions in the country.
The scars of war remain buried in the soil. Since 2020, Azerbaijan has been carrying out one of the world's most extensive humanitarian demining missions. The goal? To clear these territories of explosives and pave the way for safe reconstruction and return.
According to official data, more than 37,154 hectares of land have been cleared of mines and unexploded ordnance in Agdam. In total, over 31,500 explosive devices have been located and neutralized. priority areas for clearance, including the Barda-Aghdam Railway, the Fizuli-Aghdam Highway, and other strategic infrastructure zones.
During this activity, our personnel have undergone high-level training, and as a result of the head of state's instructions, they have been equipped for the effective implementation of clearance activities. Our mission is not only technical, it's about protecting lives. Every mine we remove brings us one step closer to safely rebuilding homes, roads, and entire communities in Karabakh.
In one of the most contaminated regions of Karabakh, clearing operations rely on a multi-layered approach. Teams on the ground are supported by advanced mechanical tools, enhancing both speed and precision in identifying hidden threats.
In addition to Anewz mine search team, mechanical mine clearance equipment and specially trained mine detection dogs are involved in the cleaning activities. This is considered one of the areas most contaminated with mines and unexploded ordnance.
Mine clearance operations in Aghdam district are currently underway in stages. Azerbaijan National Agency for Mine Action and Ministry of Emergency Situations teams are mapping dangerous areas and preparing for the next phase of demining. Access to this territory remains restricted and movement is only permitted with special authorization.
Mine contamination doesn't just halt construction, it kills. Since the 2020 war ended, 394 people have become mine victims. 70 have died and 324 have suffered injuries in Azerbaijan. More than 210 of the victims were civilians, including 14 children and 1 woman. Despite Azerbaijan's repeated calls for transparency, Armenia has failed to provide accurate minefield maps. Experts estimate 1.5 million mines were planted during the occupation, turning fertile land into a deadly trap.
In addition to the road, the land has been cleared for agricultural fields, fruit gardens, and other infrastructural areas, and has been brought to a dangerous situation. I would like to use this opportunity to call on our citizens and our people to impose unlawful entry into the dangerous parts of the lands liberated from occupation, because this is dangerous for their lives.
Just last week, Anama cleared nearly 1,292 hectares across 14 districts, including Shusha, Fuzuli, and Lashin, recovering 36 anti-personnel mines, 23 anti-tank mines, and 377 unexploded ordnance. With new hazards uncovered each week, mine clearance remains one of the most critical conditions for restoring infrastructure, ensuring safe returns, and advancing reconstruction in Azerbaijan's liberated territories.
Russia's Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov says Armenia used Russian weapons to occupy Azerbaijani territories. Speaking in Yerevan, Lavrov said Armenia used those arms for years to take control of 7 districts it never officially claimed. He also pointed out that although Armenian leaders never sought international recognition for the separatist structure in the area, they still built strong fortifications, clearly showing they had no intention of giving back the lands.
Let me remind you that Armenia, for almost all the years since gaining independence, used Russian arms as well, including during the occupation of 7 Azerbaijani districts to which it had never officially laid claim. By the way, none of Armenia's early leaders had proposed recognizing Nagorno-Karabakh as an independent entity. Yet Russian weapons were used to occupy these 7 undisputed Azerbaijani districts and to build fortifications and combat lines, clearly indicating a long-term intention to hold these territories. Some analysts even noted that the nature of the fortifications suggested there was never any plan to return these areas to Azerbaijan.
Earlier, Bakhtiar Hassanov spoke with Ahmed Ali, director of the Caucasus Policy Analysis Center, about Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov's recent claim that Armenia used Russian weapons to occupy Azerbaijani territory.
Well, it's very revealing, especially in the context that For the last couple of years, Armenian leadership, they were constantly saying that Armenia is moving away from Russia. It is moving toward the world, it's moving toward Europe, it's moving toward the United States. And in December, when there was a strategic agreement signed between the previous US administration and Armenian leadership. And now we are seeing that for the last couple of months, Armenia tells everyone that Armenia doesn't want to change any of the strategic alliance. Armenia wants to be closer to Russia. Prime Minister Pashinyan visits Farright on 9th of May, and it all the following developments demonstrates that all of those messages that Armenia was sending to European Union, to the United States for the last couple of months, they were not true, basically, putting it very simply. So that is, in that context, what we are hearing from Russian MFA that perfectly fits to this picture that Russia also understands its liability on certain issues, and Russia feels that its role in all of those issues that Armenia complains that should not be, from Russian perspective, that should not be, that should be properly analyzed. So that is why Lavrov puts out a Russian vision about how Russia assisted Armenia all of those years in the past, and even in the recent developments, Armenia got its well-needed assistance from Russia. So I believe in this context we can clearly declare that those messages that we were witnessing for the last couple of months from Yerevan and Moscow, this visit changed everything. All of this perception that we have in South Caucasus, the perception that exists in European capitals, they do not fit to this picture, to the messages that we are hearing from now, that Armenia is moving away from Russia. So that is why I believe that this is a great return of Armenia to Russian bloc, to the Russian camp. And in this context, I believe that in the upcoming weeks or months, there will be even more interesting statements and possibly actions followed.
An Azerbaijani delegation led by Azerbaijan's Deputy Foreign Minister and COP29 Chief Negotiator Yalchin Rafiev participated in the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change during Climate Week in Panama City at the beginning of the week. During the high-level talks, Rafiev highlighted Azerbaijan's COP29 achievements, notably the Baku financial goal, which aims to mobilize $300 billion annually for developing countries by 2035, and the agreement on Article 6 of the Paris Agreement concerning carbon markets. The delegation held meetings with UNFCCC Executive Secretary Simon Steele, Deputy Executive Director Noura Hamlaji, and Brazil's COP30 leadership to discuss COP29 outcomes and preparations for COP30.
Beginning to interact with each other.
A personal exhibition by renowned Azerbaijani photographer Anewz Bakirzadeh has opened in Tbilisi, reinforcing the growing cultural dialogue between Georgia and Azerbaijan. Our Nini Nikolashvili has more.
Anewz Bakirzadeh's photography is widely recognized for its philosophical depth, and the latest series offers a real glimpse into her inner universe. From abstract patterns in nature to echoes of Sufi mysticism, My Other Side captures fleeting moments that often goes unnoticed. Urban shadows, architectural textures, and dreamlike reflections that speaks to a timeless world beyond the self. This project is a subjective illustration of the world as I see it, the artist explains. I find a great inspiration in the randomness of daily life, coexistence of natural and man-made elements that shape our existence. The exhibition does not only highlight artists' international career, which includes showing in Venice, Budapest, Paris and Baku, but also reinforces the growing cultural dialogue between Georgia and Azerbaijan. Having previously exhibited in Tbilisi's Zurich Art Salon, Bakirzadeh returned to Georgia with renewed artistic vision. This event stands as an important step in a creative exchange between two neighboring countries, reinforcing how mutual respect and shared heritage can foster growing cultural dialogue between two countries. The exhibition opened on May 21st, welcoming art lovers, diplomats, and cultural figures all alike. My other side will be on display until May 30. It's Nini Nikolashvili in Tbilisi, reporting for Anewz.
That's the world news for the hour. Stay with us on Anewz for more updates.